out of these players, these freshmen, who has the best chance to contribute this season?
I would say the two guys with the best chance right now are wide receiver Elijah Thomas, who's a native of Shakota, Oklahoma, a guy that, in my mind, pretty clearly established last season during his senior year out at Shakota that he was the top player in the state. He's been remarkable since the day that he showed up at Oklahoma. He's blown everybody away in testing with some of the numbers that he's put up, some of the athleticism metrics that they have picked up on Elijah Thomas. And then, of course, when football is played on the practice field, he's been spectacular. So that's a guy that I expect to be in the rotation at wide receiver. Also expect the true freshman Cortland Guillory out of Spring, Texas, is a guy that's going to immediately slot in as a rotational contributor at corner. I would say he maybe has had the strongest offseason of anybody on the roster, just in terms of how much buzz has percolated from within about Cortland Guillory and what he's capable of being and becoming at Oklahoma. And then the top two signees in the class from a rankings standpoint were offensive lineman Michael Fasusi and Ryan Foje. I would expect both of those guys to be in Oklahoma's initial two deep when the depth chart drops next week.
Okay. I'm going to pop up, speaking of depth charts, the Art Lads depth chart. Matter of fact, if you see anything like completely out of whack, please let us know. Okay. So you know how hard it is in college, that's for sure. So let's first of all, let's start on the offense and the offensive line, because in other words, a lot of injuries last year. And they bring in Derek Simmons. I guess that's their top transfer lineman from Western Carolina. So what do you think about the state of the offensive line? You mentioned one of the offensive linemen, one of the freshmen. And I see Tucker, who does the depth charts, does a great job with it. He has a couple of freshmen on the two deep there. But talk a little bit about what you think about this year's version, as long as they stay healthy.
Yeah, a lot of experience. I think the only thing that I would flip-flop there when looking at the R-Lads projection is I do expect Heath Ozida to break camp as Oklahoma's starting left guard over Eddie Pierre-Louis. But other than that,
okay.
The starters you're looking at, you look at Jacob Sexton, a senior at left tackle. Obviously, Derek Simmons, whom you mentioned, is a sixth-year senior at right tackle. Fabechi Wiwu's a fifth-year senior at right guard, and Troy Everett is a fifth-year senior at center as well. So a ton of experience, guys that have played a lot of ball, whether at Oklahoma or elsewhere. And there's a reason why Derek Simmons was one of the most coveted offensive linemen in the entire transfer portal cycle this past winter. He's an excellent pass protector in particular. I believe he's only allowed one career sack between his time at Tusculum, Abilene Christian, and Western Carolina. So he was due for a step up in competition. OU had to fend off Alabama for his services in the portal. And anytime Alabama's involved for a guy, you tend to figure, okay, he's a ball player. He's pretty good. And Derek Simmons has been since arriving at Oklahoma. Now, he's missed a couple weeks of camp in concussion protocol, but upon his return, he's fully expected to be Oklahoma's starting right tackle, and the returns on him have been quite strong throughout the offseason.
Are there any blue chip players on the line? In other words, any players that you think have the potential to be, day one or day two NFL prospects?
I would say you're looking at two potential day two guys at the tackle spots in Sexton and Simmons. I don't think that's shooting too high in their cases. Now, it's going to take strong tape this year. They're going to have to perform. They're going to have to stay healthy. They're going to have to be the reliable bookends for this offensive line if they're to eventually occupy that tier on NFL draft boards. But it's certainly within the realm of possibility for both of those guys.
Okay. Sticking on offense and speaking of injuries, the wide receiver room, boy, that was just decimated last year. And they've had some injury issues for a little bit now. And this is what they got to get going. Especially with Mateer there, they brought in 3 transfers, as we see. Gibson looks like he could be the most interesting because he put up big numbers as the second team all FCS prospect there. Carter came from McNeese State, another FCS school. And then they get the one kid from Arkansas. And they also added the tight end from Pittsburgh State, who played at Kansas for 4 years. I guess you could say he played there. He had one catch. But talk about some of those guys, the new guys that you think might have the most impact.
Yeah, no doubt. It's been a pretty thorough overhaul for Oklahoma in the wide receiver room. You look at some of the guys that were expected to make big contributions at that position a season ago. Nick Anderson left for LSU. Andrell Anthony took off for Duke. You had Brennan Thompson transfer out to Mississippi State. J.J. Hester bailed for Kentucky, among others. And Oklahoma, in addition to bringing in two outstanding true freshmen in Elijah Thomas, whom I already mentioned, and Emmanuel Choice, they added 5 transfers at wideout. Giovanni Gibson, I would say, is easily the highest ceiling of those 5 transfers. Okay. The word before he got hurt in spring practice was that he was flat out the best wide receiver on the roster and a truly special athletic specimen. So he's getting close to resuming practice. And so once he does get back on the practice field, it'll be interesting, obviously, to see what that looks like in the aftermath of an injury that's kept him on the sidelines for close to 4 months now. But everybody in the building was oohing and eyeing over Giovanni Gibson throughout the spring. Isaiah Satania, the Arkansas transfer, I expect him to start week 1. He has been, by all accounts, John Mateer's favorite target throughout the offseason, and particularly in fall camp. They've developed a really strong rapport. And Satania is a guy that I'm just getting the sense, based on the conversations I've had with folks that are well-placed, is that he was just kind of held back by a less than ideal offensive situation at Arkansas, but he has quite a bit of untapped potential that he should be able to tap into now with his new situation at Oklahoma. Jermichael Carter, the McNeese transfer, he'll be a candidate to see snaps, as will Josiah Martin, the Cal transfer. And then the other transfer they brought in, the 5th, Keontez Lewis, formerly of Southern Illinois, had a strong year, not a Giovanni Gibson-esque year. Giovanni Gibson eclipsed 1,200 receiving yards at Arkansas Pine Bluff a season ago. Keontez Lewis had a modestly productive 700-plus yard campaign at Southern Illinois, but he's a guy that previously spent time at UCLA and Wisconsin before his one-year stint at SIU. Now he comes to Oklahoma as a 5th-year senior. It's his last chance to give himself a shot at the NFL. And he has been a big stock riser throughout the offseason. So he's been dealing with a little bit of a hamstring issue throughout fall camp to this point. But the fully healthy version of Keontez Lewis is a guy that Oklahoma is very excited to see on the gridiron this season.
Okay, so if everybody could stay healthy, or at least most, because it does look like it's it's got a deep unit, then a much better outlook. Definitely at that position for 2025. So you think then Satania, Burks, Gibson, is that what you're looking at as the top 3?
Satania, Burks, and Gibson is more than likely not going to play week 1.
Okay.
I would expect him to return early in the season, but there's really no reason to deploy him against Illinois State. That's a game that Oklahoma will win running away with or without Giovanni Gibson. So I would say Burks, Satania, and Zion Kearney, if I had to guess right now, are probably your 3 starters at wide receiver week 1.
All right. And taking a look at the rest of the offense, might as well. Well, first of all, tight end. As I mentioned, you've got this Huggins kid coming over from Pitt State, and Kent also a transfer. So do you think those are the top 2 tight ends?
I think Kent is probably the guy that starts week 1. I do expect Oklahoma to use 4, maybe 5 tight ends. I mean, all of the guys that you have listed there, Huggins, Kent, Jaron Kanik, a converted linebacker, and then Caden Helms is a guy that I've been told repeatedly throughout the offseason is probably the most well-rounded tight end that Oklahoma has. He's also a really, really impressive physical specimen at 6'5", 239 pounds. So he may be the answer. If there is an answer for Oklahoma at that position group, if one guy is the answer, it may be Caden Helms. He's dealing right now with a broken hand that he suffered toward the beginning of camp. So practicing through it, he's got a soft cast on, but obviously that inhibits your ability to catch the ball, no doubt, which is an important aspect to play in the tight end position. The other guy that's going to be in the mix for playing time, don't see him listed there, is a redshirt sophomore, Cade McIntyre as well. But I would say Kent is probably the one with the slight leg up right now to be the starter. I would expect at minimum you see snaps for Huggins, for Kent, for Kanik, and for Helms, at least early in the season until Oklahoma gets a sense of who's separating at that position.
Okay. But no difference makers like we see at running back with Jaden Ott. And that's such a big addition. And of course, Ott last year, we know what happened. But a couple of years ago, man, he was one of the more obscure running backs in the nation, especially when you play for Cal and you're out west. Not a lot of fans get the opportunity to see a player like Jaden Ott. So, yeah, what are the Sooners getting with Ott?
Yeah, I mean, when healthy, and he was not healthy at all last year, and he talked about that in his very first media availability at Oklahoma, how he was dealing with so much. It just inhibited his ability to be himself. But you rewind to 2023, when he was himself, he was the first team all Pac-12 selection at running back. So this is a guy that can play. He went for 1,300 plus rushing yards in that sophomore season of his. So he's going to be the bell cow for Oklahoma. He's going to dominate the snap count at running back. But this backfield, Greg, this might be the deepest position group on Oklahoma's entire roster because you have a senior in Javonte Barnes who has dealt with injuries of his own the last couple of years. But last time he was 100% was as a true freshman in 2022 when he rushed for 100-plus yards and 2 touchdowns in his 5th collegiate game and emerged throughout the campaign as the primary handcuff to Eric Gray, who rushed for over 1,200 yards that year. Xavier Robinson came on real strong down the stretch for Oklahoma last season. When they had not much else going for themselves offensively, Xavier Robinson was able to get into a rhythm, had a huge game against Alabama, as many will recall, and he looks well-positioned to reprise a key role in the backfield. Taylor Tatum is the former #1 overall running back recruit in the country in the 2024 cycle. He's had issues with pass protection. He's had issues with ball security, but provided he works out the kinks, I think without question, he's got the highest ceiling of anybody in the backfield. And I tell you what, though, that last guy you have listed there, Torrey Blaylock is not somebody that coming into fall camp I expected to do anything but redshirt in 2025, just because of the depth that is there in Oklahoma's backfield and the talent therein. He's a true freshman, former 4-star recruit out of the Houston area, Atascocita High School down in Humble, Texas. Torrey Blaylock has been superb from the jump in fall camp to the point where they're going to have to find him snaps is the word I've gotten out of camp to this point. Is he's simply been too good, too consistent, too explosive for them not to get him on the field in year one. So Torrey Blaylock has kind of forced the coaching staff's hand, it would seem.
That sounds like a very good backfield when you're talking about Ott as the centerpiece. And, of course, hopefully he stays healthy, but looks like Oklahoma is in pretty decent shape, even if something happens where he misses a game or two. Yeah, really good. And, of course, if you're an Oklahoma fan for as long as I have known Oklahoma, that's what the Sooners have. That's what I always remember Oklahoma football about is the running game. And just the way that it is. I mean, I know you can recently remember like a Baker Mayfield, but man, just 20, 30 years ago, back in the day, the heyday of the Sooners, it was always about the running game. Okay. So let's now move over to the defensive side. And this is, of course, Brent Venables. This is I forgot to actually, before we do that, I forgot to actually bring up the fact that there are a couple of new coaches, coordinators. So what's going to be the difference this year with the offense with the new coordinator?
Yeah, well, Ben Arbuckle is one of the sharpest young minds in college football. 29 years old, so kind of a boy wonder, kind of a wonderkind. But you look at what he's done at Western Kentucky and Washington State, the dude can call shots and call them very well. And his offense is going to be very diverse. They're going to use a lot of different formations, a lot of different personnel. Obviously, there are some hallmarks of his offense that you can pick up on tape, particularly the last couple of years at Washington State. And you look at 2024, I think part of the reason why Oklahoma fans are so optimistic about what this offense can do in 2025 is that he's operated this offense with John Mateer at the controls for a full season. And it was a spectacular season for John Mateer in which he led the FBS in total touchdowns with 44. And so the quarterback is the one guy that came in with no learning curve whatsoever as far as picking up the nuances of the offense. And if you could pick one guy that knew everything about your offense the day you walked in the door, you'd pick the quarterback, right? So the familiarity between Arbuckle and Mateer has been so beneficial for Oklahoma throughout the spring and throughout the fall, because in having a guy who knows all of the ins and outs of the playbook and the scheme, you essentially have a coach on the field out there in John Mateer. So that's been a very encouraging dynamic.
Yeah, and what have you seen so far about Mateer? And I'm sure you've done a lot of additional work on him to get ready for the season. What do you like the most about him, and what do you think he needs to do better in order to step up his game, especially now that he's going to be playing big-time football every week?
Yeah, he's a gamer, man. I think that's what stands out the most about him. And he's much akin to Baker Mayfield in that sense. Now, the Mayfield comparisons have been thrown out a little too liberally for my taste. I'm not necessarily expecting that John Mateer is going to go and win the Heisman Trophy in 2025. But stylistically and in terms of personality, there are a lot of parallels to the guy that is widely regarded as the most iconic Oklahoma football player of the 21st century in Baker Mayfield. So, man, he's obviously got a little bit of funky arm action. It's a low release, kind of slings it from the shoulder. And that has some people, including myself, to an extent, a little bit worried about how he's going to compensate for that, if he's going to need to compensate for that, going up against some of the big bodies that you're going to see in the trenches in the SEC, guys who'll be able to get their hands up and deflect passes with a little bit more frequency than perhaps John Mateer is used to playing a Mountain West schedule last year at Washington State in the remnants of the Pac-12. And so that maybe is the concern I have, as well as just adjusting to the real-time speed, because dudes are faster in the SEC than they are in the Mountain West. And so as long as those adjustments are relatively seamless from Mateer, and he's a guy that does excel at kind of creating clean throwing lanes for himself, so I wouldn't think knockdowns are going to be a huge issue, at least initially. But as long as you're able to iron out some of those finer points, I don't think there's any reason why he can't be an upper echelon quarterback in the SEC. Again, I'm not under the impression he's going to win the Heisman. I'm not under the impression he's going to go to New York. But in order for this team to accomplish all that they want to accomplish in 2025, John Mateer doesn't need to play at that level. Gone are the days where the quarterback has to carry Oklahoma to victory. This defense is capable of doing that now.
And that's what we're going to do now is talk about the defense. And even though there's a couple of co-coordinators, new guys, the fact is this is still Venables' defense, correct?
Yes. He's going to be calling the plays.
Has he called the plays the whole time?
No. So he had called plays off and on in 2022 and 2023 when Ted Roof was the DC. Last year, 2024, it was his protege, Zach Alley, who was serving as Oklahoma's shot caller defensively. But, of course, Alley departed for West Virginia. Venables and company made a run at Jim Knowles, who was then at Ohio State, and wound up choosing Penn State over Oklahoma. And so at that point, Venables decided, you know what? It's my show in 2025.
Yeah, I think it makes a boatload of sense. I mean, just look what it's done to Baylor. I know it's a different program, but they used to, of course, be rivals, and it's done wonders. I know it's been only 1 year, but things have already changed at Baylor just because of that decision. And I always think that's the right decision, especially when your job's on the line. Okay, so let's talk about this defense. Only one out of all the transfers we talked about on offense. There's only a couple of guys here on defense. And I know Marvin Jones' name really well. His dad and I actually did business years ago.
Wow.
I interviewed him on our show down in the Boca Raton at the old Pete Rose Ballpark Cafe in Boca Raton, Florida, and it was a lot of fun. And so we had a nice little connection for a little bit. So it's amazing that his son's there, but I know he's looking to breakout? Because that is a question I'm going to ask you too a little bit later, to give me a couple of breakout guys, because that hasn't happened yet. Maybe that's the reason why he wants to change the scenery. But Kendall Daniels is also a very intriguing player because of the fact that, unlike Jones, Daniels has already produced.
Yes, no question about it. He has been excellent at times over the course of his 4-year collegiate career at Oklahoma State. Last ride in 2025 with the Sooners after hitting the transfer portal this past winter. So Daniels is a versatile guy. Expect him to play quite a bit at Oklahoma's cheetah position, and also expect him to play quite a bit of inside linebacker as well. Oklahoma has kind of a multiplicitous vision for Kendall Daniels, which is understandable because he's a humongous human being who is incredibly athletic and could realistically play just about any position on the defensive side of the ball, save for cornerback and defensive tackle. Anywhere else, you could stick him and he could probably hold his own. So he and Marvin Jones were the two big transfer additions of the offseason for Oklahoma on the defensive side of the ball. This is a unit that brings back 8 of 11 starters. So there's not a ton of turnover. Now, they do have to replace 3 guys that are now playing NFL ball in Billy Bowman, Danny Stutzman, and Ethan Downs. So the 3 that they lost were key contributors, no doubt. But Kobe McKenzie, a redshirt junior, has been groomed to take over that middle linebacker role from Stutzman. He's played a lot of snaps for Oklahoma the last couple of years, so it's not as if he's going to be out of his depth. The addition of Daniels certainly gives Oklahoma additional depth and flexibility there at linebacker. Jones is likely to start opposite R. Mason Thomas, a defensive end for Oklahoma, and for him, it's just a question of whether he's able to finally tap into that 5-star potential that everybody saw in him coming out of high school. And he's produced a little bit at Georgia and Florida State, but not commensurate with what you would expect from a 5-star prospect. So this is the year for Marvin Jones to do that. He's gotten quite a push for that starting job from redshirt sophomore Taylor Wine. So I think that's been good for Marvin Jones as well. And then filling Billy Bowman's old role at strong safety is going to be another former 5-star in Peyton Bowen. And that's also a guy that has played quite a bit of football for Oklahoma over the last couple of years. So you have experienced dudes stepping into the 3 starting roles that were vacated by guys that graduated and moved on to greener pastures at the professional level.
Okay. I wanted to ask, because I was taking a look at it just over his stats, and I found it interesting because I know in 2023, he put up the big tackle numbers, but that was pretty much it, besides a couple of picks. But then last year, his tackle numbers were down, but everything else was up. the sacks, the PDs, tackles for loss. Did you notice that they played him differently? Did they have a different scheme? What did you find out about that? And maybe it goes down the line of what you were saying, is this is a guy you can pretty much play anywhere.
Yeah, and it was just a weird year at Oklahoma State last year.
It was. Yes.
I'm not sure how much you followed that program, but boy, what a tumultuous, bizarre year that was for them. And Kendall Daniels was kind of caught right in the thick of it. They went 3-9, didn't win a game in the Big 12. And it very nearly cost Mike Gundy his job. So, yeah, with some of the quirks in the calculus at Oklahoma State on the defensive side of the ball last year, I mean, it did result in the dismissal of defensive coordinator Brian Nardo. So they cleaned house in many ways, and Gundy brought in virtually an entirely new staff, and it kind of behooved Daniels to seek a change of scenery as well. Yeah. And he had very nearly come to Oklahoma out of high school. He originally signed with Texas A&M, did not last long there before asking out of his letter of intent and signing with Oklahoma State. But there was a lot of familiarity. There was a lot of comfort with the program at Oklahoma. And so it just made sense. You need a guy that can play that cheetah. You need a guy that can play inside linebacker to really feel good about the defense heading into 2025. And how convenient was it for Oklahoma that they had a guy that was right up the road in Stillwater?
That's it. All right. Now, I want to ask you about some of these holdovers, the top players to keep an eye on. You mentioned R. Mason Thomas. Of course, we know he led the team in sacks last year. Kip Lewis at linebacker. So who else should we be keeping an eye on as far as the top players that returned from last year? On defense, starting first of all.
A guy that's had a huge offseason and really come on strong over the last couple of weeks of fall camp is sophomore Reggie Powers, who is a guy that can play cheetah, and he can play that strong safety, and the Sooners are going to find him snaps at either or both throughout the season. He has been phenomenal, really made a state. Like quite frankly, Greg, I think there's a decent chance that he is starting at cheetah week 1 over Kendall Daniels, which would be no small feat whatsoever. Now, Kendall Dolby, who is Oklahoma's incumbent at the position and maybe the most valuable player on the entire defense when he's active and he's available, he missed the last 8 games of last season with a dislocated ankle that he suffered against Tennessee, and he's been dealing with a variety of ailments throughout the summer and early fall that have him on track to miss at least probably the first game or 2 of the season. I would think there's a chance they get him back from Michigan September 6th. But in his absence, Oklahoma is going to lean on Kendall Daniels and Reggie Powers at the cheetah position. And when Dolby does return, I expect him to get some run at outside corner in addition to cheetah. So Dolby's going to be on the shelf at least for a little while longer, as is Eli Bowen, who was a freshman All-American last year at that cornerback position. And that goes back to the guy I mentioned when we talked about that 2025 recruiting class. Cortland Guillory is definitely putting together a case to start week 1 opposite Gentry Williams. Now, he faces some really stiff competition because Jeremiah Newcomb and Davon Jordan, a couple of second-year guys, have had incredible off seasons as well. So the depth looks really strong for Oklahoma at corner, even in the absence of Eli Bowen.
Okay, very interesting. Offense. Give me a couple, because, you take a look at the offense. We talked about, well, actually, we didn't really zero in too much on Burks. I'm sure he'd like to have a big year. A lot was expected last year, but we all know what happened last year there. And since there's so many transfers and even maybe a freshman or two that is taking up most of the skill positions, except, of course, up front in the offensive line, is there, who would you say is the top holdover from last year on offense?
On offense, man, it's really, really hard to not pick Deion Burks. But then again, it kind of feels weird to pick Deion Burks because he only played 5 games for Oklahoma last year. But when you look at that Purdue tape and some of the stuff he did early in the season for Oklahoma before he started dealing with injury issues, man, it's clear that as long as he stays healthy and as long as the targets are coming his way in 2025, he could be one of the more electrifying players in the entire SEC. I mean, I think when you're looking at returners, it probably has to be Deion Burks on the offensive side of the ball and then R. Mason Thomas on the defensive side of the ball, who's one of the more adept pass rushers in the entire country, coming off a season in which he had 9.5 sacks. So those are the two I would say that headline either side of the ball when it comes to the returners, guys that made contributions last year and are expected to have big years in 2025.
All right. Give me a breakout player then on offense. Someone that, and we'll stick again with the veterans. Give me a guy that you think could take that next step.
Among the veterans.
Would it be someone like, I mean, what was up with Gibson's numbers? I couldn't believe when I saw 26.8 for his average on 14 catches. That was quite. Is that the
back
player
in 2023? You're referring to 2023?
Yes,
yeah. So Jaden Gibson is out indefinitely right now.
Okay,
he has not played since last. He has not put on pads since last August when he suffered a torn patellar tendon that cost him the entire season. He suffered a setback in April that kicked the timeline back even further. So he has not resumed practicing, and I haven't gotten the impression that he's particularly close to getting back on the practice field. So that's just kind of a wait and see situation right now for Oklahoma. If you're looking for a veteran that could exceed expectations, again, I would point you to Caden Helms at the tight end position. He is a guy that himself missed an entire season back in 2023 due to a catastrophic knee injury that almost cost him his football career. And he played very minimally last year, just kind of getting the confidence back, running, cutting on that knee, being very ginger with everything. But 2025, man, he's cut it loose. He's moving exceptionally well. And as soon as that hand is fully healed, I fully expect that he's going to be a key cog for Oklahoma in that tight end committee and could emerge as the starter by the midway point of the season.
Okay. And on defense, a little bit more to choose from here from holdovers. And you might have already mentioned a couple of them. So give me a breakout player or two that you think we should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I think a guy that I don't know if this would qualify as a breakout in the minds of Oklahoma fans, but nationally, I think it would. Gentry Williams is somebody that played exceptional football in 2023 as a sophomore at Oklahoma, stepped into a starting role that year, proved to be an absolute killer in run support, for one thing, which not a lot of cornerbacks are that. Not a lot of cornerbacks do that, but excellent in run support, excellent in both man and zone coverage. He's a dude with surefire, high round NFL potential, but he's coming off a shoulder injury that cost him the majority of the 2024 season. And so with him back to 100%, I think this has the opportunity to be a real statement year for Gentry Williams nationally. I think he could establish himself as one of the upper tier cornerbacks in the SEC.
And also keep an eye on those two young players too in the secondary. Would that be correct then after what you said? But the Bowen kids.
Both of the Bowens, yes, absolutely. I mean, they've both played good ball to this point. I don't think strong campaigns from them will shock anybody, at least locally. But yeah, those are going to be two very key cogs in the works. And honestly, if you're looking at that projected starting secondary right now, Greg, Robert Spears-Jennings is probably the guy that has the highest draft ceiling. 6'2", 215 pounds, one of the absolute fastest players on the roster, led the team in forced fumbles last year with 4, and is a 2-year starter, 3-year contributor for this roster.
Okay, excellent. All right. Oh, and we didn't even talk about Kip Lewis. And we know how big he is to the defense.
Yeah, that guy can play. That's one of those guys that, if you're an Oklahoma fan, you probably take it for granted at this point, but you shouldn't, because Kip Lewis is one of those rare backers that you don't see all too often. Fortunately, Oklahoma just had one of them in Danny Stutzman, so it hasn't been all that long since they saw one of college football's dominant linebackers wearing the crimson and cream. But yeah, Kip Lewis is special, no question about it.
What is his coverage? Is that like his main asset?
He's an all-around guy, man. Okay. He is good in coverage, as evidenced by the 2 pick sixes last year, one of which beat Auburn on the Plains, and the other of which kind of sunk the dagger in the heart of Alabama at Owen Field. But he's a guy that can get sideline to sideline, good at filling gaps in the run game, and so he's got a very, very polished all-around game, and somebody that you don't really, I don't think you can really pigeonhole his game. He really is a complete linebacker prospect that absolutely should hear his name called in the NFL draft.
If everybody's healthy, what's your, as a fan, what is your biggest concern? Which position group?
I would say the biggest concern is probably linebacker. And it's not a huge concern, but look, the national expectation, a lot of national pundits, the dynamic is really interesting because a lot of national pundits are even higher on Oklahoma than a lot of the local media. But nationally, it's believed that Oklahoma is going to have perhaps the best defensive line in the entire SEC. And like I said, I think there's a lot of reason to be confident in that secondary with the depth and the talent that they have there. Linebacker, like I said, Kobe McKenzie has been groomed to replace Danny Stutzman, but replacing Danny Stutzman is a lot easier said than done. So to me, I'm just curious to see what that dynamic looks like between Kobe McKenzie and Kip Lewis in the early stages of the season, and if there is any semblance of a drop-off between the level of play that existed last year with Stutzman and Lewis at the heart of that defense.
And we didn't really talk about, out of all the positions we didn't talk about, we really didn't, I don't think we talked much about the defensive tackle position. So is that just because everything's fine? It's a solid unit?
Yeah, it might be the strength of the entire roster. I mean, you're looking at 4 future NFL guys there, and Dominic Williams, Grayson Halton, Jaden Jackson Davis. Oh, there's no question. I mean, Dominic Williams and Grayson Halton, both seniors. Williams was one of the priciest defensive transfers on the market last year, coming to OU from TCU. Halton is a guy that the folks at PFF love Grayson Halton, and he has just made plays upon plays upon plays when he's gotten the opportunity for Oklahoma over the years. He's been a rotational contributor since he was a true freshman, and pretty much single-handedly clinched the game for Oklahoma, a game that was a lot closer than it should have been in non-conference play last year against Houston when he came up with a crucial safety in the final minutes of that game to ice a 16-12 victory. Jaden Jackson started all season last year for Oklahoma as a true freshman, was a true freshman All-American, and will start once again for Oklahoma in 2025. And then David Stone, you rewind to the 2024 recruiting class, he was a 5-star prospect and the #1 defensive recruit in the nation. So, yes.
Pretty impressive.
Defensive tackle is likely the strength of Oklahoma's roster.
Okay. A lot to chew on there. And special teams, new kicker, new punter. So is that just a big question mark, or do you think that they'll be just fine?
Yeah, Oklahoma invested in special teams this offseason in the portal because they needed to, Greg. Field goal kicking has been mediocre at best, putrid at worst for about the last 5 years at Oklahoma. I mean, it's never a guarantee. It hasn't been a guarantee for 5 years now, sending your field goal kicker out there that you're going to be putting up 3 points. So Oklahoma went, and initially what they did was they brought in Kennesaw State transfer Austin Welch in the winter portal window. He had a shaky spring. They went and brought in UTSA transfer Tate Sandell, who was an all-conference performer for the Roadrunners last year in the spring portal window to stabilize the situation at kicker. So it's going to be Sandell's gig to start things off. He's a left-footed kicker who holds several school records at UTSA, including the mark for longest field goal. He hit from 54 last year, and he only missed 1 kick from inside 50 yards a season ago. So should be a lot of added stability there. Oklahoma also went and brought in punter Jacob Ulrich from Kennesaw State, who averaged, I believe, north of 45 yards per punt a season ago. So big leg on that kid. Obviously, you hope you don't have to use the punter a whole heck of a lot, but Oklahoma's playing SEC football. So you're going to want to have a weapon at that position because at a certain point, you will get into a field position struggle with an opponent.